Hi, everyone. So as promised, I'm going to do a part two, and we're going to look at the residuary structure in Wealth Council. So the residuary is, again, what is left over after all specific distributions have been made, after all of the grantors have passed away, after usually estate tax or other administrative expenses have been paid. It's just what remains in the trust. It's usually the children, but if a grantor or grantors have no children, it could be nieces and nephews, friends, other family members. It could be charities, it could be anyone. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up Wealth Council, and I have dual screens, so please bear with me where I'm like not looking exactly at the camera. And I'm going to show you how to, again, we're going to review starting a matter in Wealth Council because we're still early on in our tenure here in Drafting Gurus. So we're going to go to My Practice, navigate over to Matters. And in here, I already have Casey and Chris plugged in. We've synced everything in there. And we're going to create a new document, okay? So remember what we were talking about is we were talking about a joint trust. And I didn't tell you whether it's a disclaimer or anything like that, but we have a joint trust and we have children, okay? We have Wyatt and Celia, and I've added a stepdaughter in this cipher. So Casey and Chris have 3 children for this example. And we're going to go ahead and hit create, and we're going to remember draft from a scenario. So we're going to check revocable living trusts. We're going to click here, and we're going to click living trusts and ancillaries, create a document, and we are not going to draft from scratch. We're going to create a new scenario, and we're going to look for our scenarios. Now here, I'm going to show you a bunch of different scenarios, right? I'm going to show you different structures of the residuary. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick 4B. We're going to do a Massachusetts joint trust disclaimer, no common trust outright to children. We're going to start there and see the different options, okay? So I'm just going to title this Casey, Hill Casey, and Malia Chris, and we're going to call this residuary structure because we're going to look at the different ways of structuring the residuary. Where is it in the Wealth Council interview? Remember, this is the interview in Wealth Council, okay? Let's take a look at Casey. As you can see, we have 92% of our things filled in. We're going to fill her county in. And we're going to take a look at Chris over here. Probably the same thing. He's a citizen. Okay. Oh, we're missing something over here. Oh, we're missing her citizenship. All right. And that's fine with our trust name, but we're going to shorten it here. The Casey and Chris Living Trust, like what we were working with before. And we're just going to fill our signing date in and add them as initial trustees. This is just kind of a way that we're starting. I'm just kind of showing you through the interview. Now, in order to get the residuary, to be able to work in the residuary, we're going to go ahead and plug in Casey and Chris's family. Okay, so let's try to get Wyatt Todd in there. He's the oldest. And then we're going to get Celia. And then we're going to go ahead and get Cypher. And let's give them some birth dates and relationships. So that's their son. That's their daughter. And we're going to call this Casey's daughter. So it's Chris's stepdaughter. All right. Cypher was born 10/31/2021. Let's have Celia born 8/25, even though I think it's wrong. I think it's January. And we'll have her born around the same time. We'll do 2020. And we'll have Wyatt Todd born in 2018. So we got some minor children going on over here. We're not going to include afterborn or adopted children. They're with their family. And now we're going to navigate down here to the residuary because that is what we are focused on. So this is the survivor's trust. Remember, in this, we've chosen a disclaimer. So everything goes to the survivor's trust with the option to disclaim assets into the credit shelter trust or move them. But now we're going to go down to the residuary, Article 11, distribution to our descendants, and we are going to walk through the residuary options and look at what they look like in Wealth Council. Okay, so here we go. Residuary options. So our first option here is outright, and we talked about that. Divide it outright into shares for our descendants per stirpes, okay? Per stirpes means that if Celia or Wyatt predeceased or Cypher predeceases, their 1/3 share is going to go to their children. Other options include pro rata or by representation, and there's some great videos in Wealth Council on that. We'll go over that as well when I point out those videos to you. But remember, right now we're looking at the structure. So let me go back to the diagram, right? So this would be the second death here. So we'll give a little sad face, all right? And outright means we're dividing in equal thirds among the children. And Wyatt is getting his share outright in his name, Wyatt Todd. Celia is getting her share outright in her name. And Cypher is getting her share outright in her name. Now we know we have minor children. So if we did this here, we would be going to probate if we're giving 4 and 5-year-old stuff outright, which is why Wealth Counsel does have an option in the interview for underage beneficiaries. So we're going to go ahead over here, and I'm just going to show you the default option for underage beneficiaries. I have to fill out just this. Remote contingent, let's go down. And here we are, administration for underage, 25 right here. Administration for underage beneficiaries, 25. So anyone under 25 is considered underage. You can change that number, right? And your clients may choose to change that number in their design sheet. So even if, right, we filled this out for our residuary here, even if we filled it out outright and we had this structure where it's going 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but Wyatt, Celia, and Cypher are 6, 4, and 4 years old. They're under 25. That backup clause down there is actually going to hold their shares in trust pursuant to that section. Okay, because we've defined underage beneficiaries as anyone under age 25. Okay. Another way to do that, which I don't use often, is this one. Divided into shares to be distributed outright to anybody over a certain age and in trust for anybody under. So we can look at here the age for outright distribution. We can make it 25. And then we can design the trust for the person that is under, or the people that are under 25. Now let's take a look at how this compares when we look at what the language looks like. So right now we're in the interview. Remember, the interview is over here. We're filling out the client choices. The interview is over here. And we're going to go to the working document to take a look at what the language looks like between these two. First, let's look at the language when we just choose outright to descendants, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. We're going to go over to our working document, and sometimes this takes a while if I'm using Zoom over here. So I'm just going to head over to working document. It just takes a bit to load. It takes a lot of bandwidth. And we're going to see the actual language now. Okay, the actual language that when we're achieving outright per stirpes. And again, or per stirps, meaning by branch. So let's go to over here, distribution to our descendants. See, it's very short. Upon the death of the survivor of us, our trustee will distribute our assets, not distributed in other portions of the instrument, outright and free of trust per stirpes to our descendants, right? So that's going to go 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3 in their name. But if they're under 25, it'll hold it pursuant to Article 13. So in order to see what the trust looks like for those under 25, we have to go down here to Article 13. We have to look for underage beneficiaries. There they are, underage and incapacitated beneficiaries. Here are the instructions for that right there, default in Wealth Counsel. All right, let's head back to the interview and let's look how this looks. Remember I said we could say like everyone under age 25 is getting it in trust. Everyone over age 25 is getting it out of trust. Again, it's pretty much achieving the same result there with slight differences. And it kind of makes it more about the grantor's intent. Like I really want everyone under age 25 to get this in trust rather than the underage beneficiary, which is more of a backup clause, okay? So we'll go down to distribution to our descendants. And now you see we have some different language. Look. So now we're going to divide it into separate shares. But again, it's going to tell us that over 25 is going outright of free of trust. Under 25 is going in trust. And now instead of having to go down to Article 13, here is the directions for administration of the descendants trust. So if there's a non-interested trustee, they can distribute as much income and principal to the underage beneficiaries. So if Cypher, Celia, and Wyatt are all underage and we have an independent trustee, Amanda, serving, then she can go ahead and give money for college, education, fancy things, anything that I think that I want, any purpose, anything that I deem advisable. But if there is an interested trustee, it's limited to health, education, maintenance, support, IRS, like definitional standards here. Now, when the beneficiary gets to 25, right, or the funding of a trust is established for someone who's already 25, they can get any part of it outright, free of trust, right? Gives them the option here, right? So the beneficiary just provides written notice. They can get it outright and free of trust. And this says what happens if a beneficiary dies. So again, instead of going down to Article 13, which is still there, we've designed what the trust looks like. So if we go down, this is backup supplemental needs trust, and then we head all the way down to incapacitated and underage beneficiaries here. I think it should still be here. There it is, section 3.02. So that's all about like retention and trust, kind of says similar, right to withdraw language, kind of similar. So it's, you know, it's still the backup provision, because remember, this could also apply to incapacitated beneficiaries. All right. All right. So we've covered outright, and we've covered, okay, some people are getting it outright and people under a certain age are getting it in trust. Now let's look at if we just add the common trust. So we're going to go outright, but we're just going to add a common trust in, okay? And when we click yes here, we're going to say when the youngest child, again, we're going to say when they reach 25. So until they're 25, everything is going to be held together for the benefit of both or all beneficiaries here, Wyatt, Celia, and Cypher. And we're not going to draft any kind of specific guidelines. So remember here, after the first death, ooh, that's a really bad line, everything will go down into a common pot trust. And if we are looking at the triangle again, the grantors don't change. It's Casey and Chris. The trustee now, Casey and Chris, are gone. They're dead. The trustee is me. And the beneficiaries of the common pot trust are Wyatt, Celia, and Cypher. And when the youngest of them, Cypher, reaches 25, then it's going to go outright, a third, a third, a third. Let's just go over there and let's look at the language in the document so we can see what we are drafting, okay? Now, the cool thing is you can have scenarios set up so that each of these different options you have already saved. So if you see a design sheet that says, you know, common trust outright, you can have a scenario that design the residuary that way. And that is in our scenario index. Let's go down to Article 11. Now we have the common trust. Here we're looking for our common trust. Here's how the common trust is going to be administered by the trustee, which in this case is me. You'll see there's no primary beneficiary, right? It's not Wyatt. When we look at the triangle, right? There's no one beneficiary. The purpose of the common trust, the primary beneficiary refers to the majority of the children, right? All the children together, Cypher, Celia, Wyatt. Terrible writing, everyone, terrible writing that I'm making there. I hope you love my doodles. Trustee could make advancements, it can give to guardians, and then again, it will terminate. And then after termination, it goes outright and free of trust. So there's our common pot trust. All right, then divided into shares, each share held in trust. And this is if all the beneficiaries were receiving the same trust. So everyone's getting a general needs trust. Everyone's getting an LAPT. So remember when I said in these kind of trusts, when we look at the triangle here, maybe the beneficiary is Wyatt, Celia, and Cypher, but maybe the beneficiary is also their descendants. Who's the beneficiary? This is the button right here. Are the grandchildren also considered considered beneficiaries of the trust right now during their lifetime? Distribution of income, right? So this is how, do we want to give them a right to withdraw the greater of taxable income and accounting income? I'm just going to put no, make this more like simplified, and that the trustee can give income and principal beneficiary discretionary, totally discretionary. I'm going to give a medium amount of asset support, saying an independent trustee can make distributions for any purpose whatsoever. But if the trustee is interested, they can only make distributions according to HEMS. If we want to do really conservative, we'll say the trustee can make distributions for any purpose. And if there's no independent trustee, if the trustee is an interested party, right, that's related or subordinate to the beneficiary, no distributions are coming out of this trust. That's the most conservative, okay? Distribution guidelines, I'm not going to put any, but if we do put conservative, I can show you what they look like, and liberal. It just gives some different outlines. So if we head over there, I think I just clicked on conservative, and I'm just going to kind of show you what the language difference is. And I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I think you should just compare it, right? Because if your attorneys are asking for like a conservatively drafted LAPT for asset protection, you should know what it means, okay? So we got to go back to Article 11. Distribution guidelines, advancements. Oh, sorry. Let's just go down because we want to do LAPT. Okay. Guidelines for distributions. Here it is. This is the conservative. In making distributions, we desire and encourage the beneficiary to develop a strong work ethic, to be productive and contributing member of society, to provide for those who are dependent on them, and the trustee always consider other NORN resources available to Cypher, Celia, and Wyatt before making distributions. Let's look how that compares to more liberal directions to distribute, okay? And again, your attorneys probably have a default preference on this, or maybe they indicate it every time in their design sheet how they want the LAPTs designed. And in this case, it's 3 LAPTs with equal thirds. Head back down to 11. We got to go past the common trust. And here's our guidelines. These are liberal. Look how different this is. In making discretionary distributions, we desire to provide for the well-being and happiness. Although we request that our trustee consider unknown resources before making distributions, we also request that our trustee be liberal in making distributions. And we acknowledge that the principle of this trust, the money in it, could be exhausted by the trustee's use of liberal distributions in the LAPT, okay? So again, this trust structure is right now we got a common pot, and then we got down to 3 lifetime asset protection trusts. And we are designing the terms of this lifetime asset protection trust over here in the interview, okay? When we get down to rights of withdrawal here, termination, that's the difference over here between ages and stages and lifetime. See, there's no ages and stages language here. If we do not give the beneficiary any right to withdrawal, then it's going to be for his lifetime, his or her or their lifetime. If we go at ages, right, then it's going to have, different ages in which they can withdraw. So 25% at 25 increased. These rights are cumulative by 25% at 35. And at age 40, these beneficiaries can take all the money. And let's take a look at how that looks when we move over into Wealth Counsel here. The difference, right? There was no rights to withdraw anywhere, right? It's held there. And there was directions for how the trustee could distribute the money out, but we didn't have any rights to withdraw. Now we move down from the common trust. And let's take a look at our right to withdraw. Here it is. 25% of the accumulated trust income and principal when they're 25 increased by 25%. So remember, now it's 50%. It's cumulative, and then all at age 40. So they could leave it in trust, but they have the right to withdraw all. I call this financial independence builder because it has less asset protection as the child gets older, because they have a right to withdraw all of it. So it could leave it open for creditors to attack or take. All right, instead of going down and looking at the rest of these interview questions here, which we will cover, let's stick to the trust structure and look at, again, different ways. Now, let's say we don't want this situation where they're all getting LAPTs. Our children, Wyatt, Celia, and Cypher here, are different people. They have different needs. So we are going to divide the shares still evenly for Serbies. They're still going to get a third, and a third. But each child is going to receive it differently. It's not the same here. So to do that, we got to pick this middle button here. We got to pick the fourth button. Sorry, we were just doing the middle. That was state the terms apply at once. We got to pick here. Let's change it up. All right, so we're going to remove our common trust now, and here are our distribution details. Wyatt is responsible. He is going to get his share outright and free of trust. Celia is not responsible at all, so she's going into a general needs trust, and we're not going to give her a lot of power here. We're going to draft this super conservatively here. We need some asset protection. She's going to have no withdrawal rights because it's for her lifetime. I'm not going to give her power to direct these assets to anybody. We're definitely going to say no to that. And at her death, it can go to her descendants, if none to Casey and Chris' descendants in trust here. That's what happens when Celia passes away. Now, Cypher, we just need her to be more financially independent as she goes on. She can make decisions, but she's still young yet. So we're going to give her a somewhat conservatively drafted trust, but we're going to give her withdrawal rights, so ages and stages. So again, at age 25, she can take 25% trust, and this can be anything you want. So we'll do a different one. At age 35, let's say we're going to increase it by 50. We hope she's super responsible. And then by age 38, before 40, she can take all of it. All right. We're going to say no to all that. We're not going to let her direct this to anybody else. We're going to give it to her children. So on her death, it's going to go to her descendants, if none to Casey and Chris's descendants in trust. Okay. And any descendants of a deceased child will say they're held in trust, similar to Cypher's ages and stages, because Celia's the only one who's super special, and she has like lots of needs, and she's not going to spend money well. She's just going to buy all the bouncy tennis balls that there are, right? And we can't have her wasting money on that. So I know right now some of you are like, "Woo, this is tough stuff," right? This is like, oh my gosh, we're looking at the language. It's a lot, right? All right, so let's go down. Distribution of our descendants. Now you'll see each is different. Wyatt is getting his outright. Now he's actually named by name. Instead of it's just like descendants per stirpes, we're actually naming Wyatt by name. Same thing, Celia here. She's going a lifetime asset protection trust. Okay, so there is very little rights for her or anything like that. She is just, the trustee is just holding it in trust for her. And an independent trustee can make distributions for any purpose. When she dies, it goes to her children if there are any. If not, if no children, back to Cypher and Wyatt. Now, Cypher is a little different. Cypher has ages and stages. So we can see Cypher's ages and stages drawn out here. And so how this is going to look in the diagram, right? If we draw a little diagram here is, again, we have the second death, sad face, and Wyatt is getting his outright, no trust around it. Celia is getting, ooh, that's really bad. C is getting it for life in trust, and Cypher is doing ages and stages. So hers can actually come out when we hit these milestones, 25, 35, and 38. She has the right to withdraw. So we have an outright, we have a lifetime, and then we have ages and stages, right? Each beneficiary receiving something slightly different from the next beneficiary. All right, let's go back, and we are going to go over this one again in a different way. And let's change Celia. Celia has now been diagnosed with something. She will probably always need to be on government aid, and we'll design her special needs trust. We'll give her care manager provisions, meaning the trustee can hire someone like a social worker to be able to kind of evaluate her needs, because maybe the trustee isn't the best person for that. So that gives them an option to hire someone. And we'll say, no, the trust continues as a special needs trust. We're not going to be able to like terminate the trust or change it. We're still not going to give her a power of appointment. And on her death, it's going to go to her descendants. I just want to show you what this is going to look like when we go over here to the working document. So you can actually see the design of the special needs trust, not just as the backup provision in Article 13, but in the residuary, right? Still in trust, just a different kind of trust here. Distribution to our descendants. Wyatt is still going outright. And now we have Celia, the distributions of the special needs trust with all those rules, right? To try to protect those from government being taken by the government or disqualifying Celia from government aid. Much more distribution guidelines here. We have the use of that care manager to provide services, making an annual care plan, how to replace or remove that care manager, and Cypher still with her ages and stages trust. All right, finally, what if Casey and Chris like one of their kids better than the other, or there's a reason to give them uneven shares? Then we have to divide it into shares for named beneficiaries, charities, foundations, and state the terms separately for each way to do that. So now we're going to list the beneficiaries here: Wyatt Todd, Celia, and Cypher, And we're going to give that they're individuals. For some reason, this thing is not intelligent enough to know their relationship, even though we already put it in. Son, daughter, oops, daughter, and now we're going to put in the percentages. So we're going to give 1/2 to Wyatt, and we're going to make this uneven, 1/4 divided between Celia and Cypher. Let's make Wyatt's Todd share outright. Then you have to say who it goes to after he dies. Celia stays in her special needs trust, and Cypher stays in her ages and stages. But again, you could change it to anything you want to. I just want you to show you this is how you get the residuary to be uneven. And an uneven residuary is common. It's especially common when we're not giving it to children, right? We're giving it to different people, charities, friends, families, etc. Okay? And these are really the 4 pre-programmed ways in Wealth Counsel you can design the residuary. There are other ways that it's going to require you to use custom clauses, but we just kind of want to know the different ways the residuary could possibly inherit. Let's go back down to Article 11. And now, oops, I wrote 1/5. This should have been 1/2. Sorry, guys, if I confused you. 1/2. So Wyatt's getting 1/2, Celia's getting 1/4, and Cypher's getting 1/4. And again, it still says how each of them are inheriting below, right? Or it says Wyatt's going outright, Celia's staying in her special needs trust, and Cypher is getting her ages and stages trust. All right, so you can revisit the interview. You can plug around in here, look at the language, compare liberal and conservative language, and kind of look at these residuary beneficiary, these options over here, okay? And yeah, it's now we've kind of gone through, not only did we go through them in the diagram, but we took a look at how they're designed in Wealth Counsel. Again, when we build out scenarios, we're going to build out different scenarios for each type of residuary. And your attorney is going to have, when I was filling out that kind of information, like, do I give the beneficiaries a right to withdraw principal and income? Do I provide them more or less asset protection? Your attorney is going to have ways to do this and options that they like to select. And those might be the default options in the scenario. But some things will always change. Some things they're always going to ask the clients, right? And so it's going to be that information needs to be in the design sheet for you to understand what kind of trust to draft. But don't worry, when you do your assessments, you're going to have practice in doing just that. I hope this is helpful in understanding the residuary and walking through the different residuary options and kind of thinking through how this would play out. Again, I invite you to go into Wealth Counsel to make a fake scenario with your family, with your sister's family, with made-up characters, whatever you like. Could use the Harry Potter ones and start trying to achieve different residuary outcomes. Just start trying to achieve them in your mind. Say, I want them all to get it outright. Look what it looks like. I want somebody to get 25%, someone to get 25%, someone to get 1/3, someone to get 1/3, whatever it is, just figure, kind of do it out and see what the different options are. Start getting in the system, just messing around, not going to mess anything up. You can delete whatever when you're done, or you can just leave it there as your little test matter. All right. We will see you in live session.